It is now my great pleasure to introduce today's commencement speaker. In the face of a very messy world, I wanted to choose a speaker who embodies what the School of Public Policy is all about. Someone who has been in the arena, who has taken on the toughest of problems, who has conceived of and presented and driven solutions, and who embodies the highest ethics, and who has led. And boy, has our speaker today ever led. I first saw Amina Mohammed in action when she constructed and ran a Millennium Development Goal Council in her native Nigeria. She had gathered the president, most of his cabinet, the leadership of the national legislature, and key representatives from business and civil society, all one room, and ran them through the most rigorous Socratic seminar I have ever seen. She was so skilled at challenging the audience and drawing them out, it was almost easy to forget that these were all of the most powerful people in the country. They were virtually all men, but they more than met their match in our speaker today. She built an unstoppable coalition advancing social and economic development in her country, lifting literally millions of people out of poverty, and in the process earned herself the nickname Madam MDG. Our students will know MDGs are Millennium Development Goals. And when I heard this spoken by her countrymen, they spoke it in a tone of reverence, tinged with a little bit of fear. I also wanted in our commencement speaker someone who inspires. Today's speaker has inspired me as a colleague, as a global citizen, and as a person for many years. I watched in awe as she maneuvered 192 member governments of the United Nations to agree on a robust set of sustainable development goals. Without her vision, her iron backbone, and her soft touch, the world would not have the SDGs that we can claim as global heritage for all people today. After that success, she wanted to go home. This time, she was invited back to become Minister of Environment in Nigeria. Within months of her re-arrival in her country, Nigeria had not only become a leader in the environmental field, it was innovating in ways never imagined, including issuing its first green bonds. This only months after she innocently asked me, "What exactly is a green bond?" I think she might remember that conversation. But through all of this, she has always found time for her friends, her colleagues, people in need, and her precious 6 children. Ms. Amina Mohammed is the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations and a person to lead our global community that I cannot imagine better. She is an inspiration to many, and certainly to me. Ms. Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Thank you. That wasn't me. Distinguished faculty of the University of Maryland, distinguished graduating class of 2017, parents and family and friends that are all in this room, especially the children, because I can hear them, they're here. I really am inspired to be with you today and to share this celebration. I always love the energy that you get in a room with so many young people, and expectations of you today are so high. Our world really does need the energy, it needs your vision. And I remember what I was like at your age, and so the commitment that you must have, not just to doing good, but to doing the right thing, is so important at a time like this. I want to add my condolences to the loss of a student who would have played a big part in the future, and we never will know what he would have reached or what lives he would have touched. But I hope that his passing would not be in vain, and that we will remember that his passing is a collective responsibility. It's about our humanity, about striving to hope that this never ever happens again to any human on any campus, which is a citadel of learning. I know that today, after you've graduated, half of you will seek jobs in the federal, state, and local governments, while the rest may look in the world of non-profits, of business, and academia. And some of you, I hope, may even join the United Nations, even though it is coming under a little bit of a bashing these days. Wherever you end up, the world is going to depend on you using the expertise to do good and to make a real difference in people's lives on the ground. This has been the driving reason for me most of my professional life, ever since I worked for a firm of architects and engineers as we designed schools and hospitals in public places. I saw the need for governments and institutions to be organized to deliver for the people that they're supposed to serve, especially the poor and the most vulnerable in society who very often don't have a voice. It's the reason I became an activist for quality education, and it is the reason why I was offered and accepted a role many times in government to promote sustainable development that delivers for people. And it is why I recently accepted the privilege and the honor of becoming the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations to help make a difference in a world of 7 billion people. On that note, I'd like to pay tribute to your Dean, Professor Robert Orr, Bob, that's how we know him, for his initiative to promote the concept of the do-good generation. I worked really closely with Bob, and I know him for quite some time, and both when we worked for Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Bob was an integral part of the Secretary General's climate change strategy, and he and Mr. Ban deserve much of the credit today of what we see as the Paris Agreement, the work that went in to bring everyone, to bring science to reality, to try to give chance of making policy connect with practice, and for us all to know that it is a collective responsibility to try to make that happen. Those talks were successful in 2015, and 2 years later, we hope that we can begin to take action in a really serious way. Over the same period, I was working very closely with member states to finalize the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and this is a pledge, a commitment made by governments of our world, including your government, to work together in partnership for a world of peace, of prosperity, dignity, and opportunity for all on a healthy planet. I'm often asked if there were not too many goals, and from 8 MDGs to go to 17 SDGs, we can't even remember them, and, should they be so many? Well, the fact is we started with about 500. But what 17 were is a response to the reality that we live today, the narrative of a world that is so connected, a global village. And it is those 17 that we need to help guide us, to give us the world that we believe is everyone's right. This is a world that you should inherit. And it is the world that you're already starting to shape as consumers, as voters, and as leaders in your own communities. You're part of the largest population of young people that our world has ever seen. Some 1.8 billion people are between the ages of 10 and 24, and each one has his or her own unique hopes and dreams. You are the do-good generation, and we need you to make that impact felt in the entire world. And start that from home, in your own families and your communities, but always thinking globally. That is what I've always tried to do, to connect the local with the global and the global with the local. Today I have 4 daughters and 2 sons, and 3 of them graduates, and I'm about to become a grandmother. But I still remember what I was like at your age. I was impatient. I didn't want to wait for a better world. I was always being told, take it easy, your time will come. And I was always thinking, my time is now. And that's what you should be thinking. It's still what I think. Today I've got a fancy job title, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. But on a serious note, my job description is really very simple. It's about the world that I would like to contribute to build where every girl and boy has the tools, the structures, and the support to make their dreams a reality. My dreams were realized with the support of a basic education in Nigeria, in a place today that birthed Boko Haram, a place today where girls are kidnapped, raped, turned into suicide bombers, and if and when they return, they are broken and often shunned by those families and communities they were taken away from. But you and I know that terrorists are not born. They're man-made. We must address those root causes and make the links between our policies and the practice from global to local to ensure that our results are inclusive of everyone, leaving no one behind and not to a life of terrorism. We have no time to wait or to waste. We do live in a world that is seriously out of balance, where 8 people have as much wealth as half of humanity, and wait for it, all of them are men. Joblessness, particularly for young people, is on the rise. In many parts of the world, it's completely off the charts. Mistrust and insecurity are growing. When we see jobless numbers, we see statistics. But we must always remember that each statistic is a person, a mother or a son, a father or a daughter, struggling to have a better life. We must always give statistics a human face. We must never lose sight of these human stories and the right that we all have to a life of dignity. The promise of the 2030 Agenda is certainly to leave no one behind. So it is important to have a good idea of who these no ones are. They're the people without a voice, living on the margins of society, the poor, the hungry, the powerless. They could be indigenous people, or abused women, or the homeless person that you see on the way home, or the educated person excluded from the economy. We have to care about them because they are us. If you forget one person, you forget the rest. One person today in 8 lives in extreme poverty. 1 in 10 suffers from hunger or malnutrition. 2 people in 5 lack access to adequate sanitation. Rates of maternal and newborn and child mortality are unacceptably high. Millions of children and adolescents are out of school. Millions more are in education and need a quality outcome, not one where they pass through education and education doesn't pass through them. Women and girls are still deprived of equal rights and opportunities. Gender equality and women's empowerment are an imperative. And if we believe, as I do, that our greatest assets are our human resources, then surely today it makes no economic sense whatsoever if we only invest in half of them. So too must we invest in affordable and clean energy for all, people, and a transformation to a low-carbon economy. This applies to the home in Baltimore that cannot pay for power as much as it does the rural African village. Climate change for us today is real and gathering pace. We have a roadmap in the Paris Agreement. So it is left for us to implement it now and not tomorrow. We know climate change is man-made, and I'm going to underscore man because if women were in charge, I can tell you we wouldn't be in this dilemma. Right, women? Yes. So today, that we have the resources, the knowledge, the skills, and the collective responsibility to act now is one good sign. We in the developed world have as much right as others to a life of peace and prosperity. But let me tell you that we have absolutely no right to contribute to islands going underwater where people may survive because we migrate them, but they will lose their homes, they will lose their country, they will lose their identity and the right to thrive. And that we have no right to take away from them. This added to the prospects for peace and justice that are being undermined by widening inequalities within and between countries, unplanned urbanization, and a lack of resilience to economic and environmental shocks, all of which we have the resources to stop. These are just some of the challenges of sustainable development. This is a world that you're entering as graduates, and it is the world that you will need to change to make a real difference in. I believe that young people have already begun the change and demonstrated that technology is empowering people across continents, touching sectors like health, education, migration, and financial inclusion. And we saw just recently where young people saw the dilemma of migrants who had suffered untold hardship crossing the Mediterranean, and then only to come to a Europe where there was so much hostility, there was so much neglect, and in many, many cases, their rights abused. And to see young people designing apps for their colleagues to try to make their way through what was absolutely unimaginable. So young people, you are making a difference. How can you do more? The challenges are huge. What can one person do against such massive odds? The answer really is just to do something, because if we each do something, and we do it no matter how small, it really does add up to a lot. And I really do mean just do something. As Nike would say, just do it. Talk is easy. Retweeting and liking on Facebook is also easy. My daughter told me one day when I asked her why she wasn't marching for women's rights, "Mommy, we don't do that. We march online." Okay, really? All of these are important because communication is key to breaking the silos, and we have to break the silos. We can no longer live in those silos. It's key to breaking the barriers to sustaining peace, but we do need to do so much more. We need to connect the talk to that walk, and in some cases, we need to run. In Nigeria, we typically say, and I'm being told that all the time with this posh English accent, "Na grandma we go chop." And this means, are we going to eat words and books? Is that what's going to fill an empty belly? And the challenge is to you to make those words and policy a real impact in the lives of people so that they can have democracy on a full stomach and that they can prosper and thrive. It may seem like whatever we do is just a drop in the ocean, but what is the ocean after all but a collection of drops? I'm reminded of a sign that I saw in a recent Women's March in Washington. People of compassion and integrity who really do care about the environment and human rights and peace, and have sneeringly been referred to as snowflakes. Well, this sign said, "Watch out, enough snowflakes, make an avalanche." My recent experience as a Minister of Environment in Nigeria gave me deep insights into many challenges, but also the opportunities. I saw three aspects of the environment: the pollution in the Niger Delta, which for years had taken up the lives of people. I saw climate change turn Lake Chad into 1/10 of what it was, excluding people from livelihoods and birthing Boko Haram. I also saw a new phenomena of urbanization where we need more food, and suddenly farmers and herdsmen were slaughtering each other for that land. All that happening in 2016, 2017. But I also saw the opportunity of environment and what we could do in that ministry to begin the largest ever cleanup in the world in the Niger Delta. And to do that with the oil companies, partners that we never thought we would have because they were at the root of the cause of that pollution. But I also saw how we could begin to really see an economic corridor that was green in the Great Green Wall in the desert, so that women would get jobs. And we would not just be planting trees to stop the desert, but that we would be planting trees that had economic value, and so there was a full value chain. But that needed policies in place to bring the practice to reality. But I also saw the mediation that we needed for nomads to understand that those routes for livestock may have to change because our communities were growing and they needed to be fed. But it needed to be a conversation to make people understand that there are alternatives you're not just taking away and with nothing to replace, and so they were losing. Everyone needs to understand whatever the change, include them in that tent. It is so important to allowing us go forth more peacefully. And so what we really need from you, an avalanche of great leadership, informed by thoughts and good deeds and habits and good living that can make our life a better place for all. We take these things for granted, but when you look at the results of what we see in our communities today, it is because we left the good out of most of the things that we try to do. We've left it to someone else. It's someone else's problem. It's someone else's fault. But at the end of the day, it begins and ends with us. As you begin your careers, you will work from 9 to 5, making it count. But remember to make the results count for when you go home and you become one of the 7 billion. You have to take that reality of what you do in those four walls to the reality of a global space where there are no borders really, and we see that every day, and to make that count. I've really enjoyed this opportunity of sharing my thoughts and experiences with you. I could do so much more, but I know that you want to get on with the celebrations. But I believe sharing our stories is one of the most important things that we can do for each other, to help us be comfortable in our skin to help us have the empathy and compassion for others, to help us have the courage of our convictions, to help us stay away from the globalization of indifference, and to walk the path that we must walk for humanity. Today at 56, I'm a proud mother of 6 children and the second highest civil servant in the world, a woman of color from the South, a faithful Muslim, with a grandfather, incidentally, who is a Presbyterian minister of the church. And I am a survivor, not a victim of single parenthood or gender violence or discrimination that continues even today. My story continues in the belief that things don't have to be the way they are for those that are being left behind. I can and I will do something about it every day. I will also know that I have to go further if everyone comes on board with us. You can't do this alone. We can never lift this alone. So it is about holding those hands and pushing the boundaries of what people say is ambition, because ambition means lives saved, and every life lost is one too many. So partnering for all of us, collaboration for all of us is essential. And so knowing that every one of us here today has a journey to make, a path you choose is what you make of it, even when we really don't know where that path is taking us. And so what I really call to action and ask of you today is to make every step and milestone count, not just for you, but for the others that just happen to be born to a different circumstance, remembering that it could just be you. Thank you, and congratulations, class of 2017. Go forth and do good. God bless you all.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary General, for sharing your story, sharing your wisdom, for your leadership, and for setting an example for girls, boys, and adults all around the world. Deepest appreciation. As a token of our esteem and appreciation, I do have a small gift for you. If you would come, we will be filling this for you at a later date.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
She's now an honorary Terp, and when I tried to explain to her this morning what a Terp is, she said, wait a minute, that's the turtle from the Chesapeake Bay. So you can't get one over on this Deputy Secretary General.